Are you ready to bring your dream body and health into life, but just can't seem to keep the motivation going? And is it finally time to address the self-sabotage and the unwanted eating behaviors, such as binge eating, emotional eating, and nighttime eating, that are getting in the way of your goals? And do you ever wonder what it would take for you to feel in control of your rituals so that you can stay consistent and see results? Welcome to this week's special Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, where you'll learn how to overcome unwanted eating behavior and other self-sabotaging habits by shifting your nervous system so that your body works with you instead of against you. I'm your host, Shaban, and with each episode, I am honored to be your coach and guide in the journey to make peace with food and find food and body freedom so that struggle with weight is a thing of the past. When you tune in every Thursday on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast, you'll catch the latest conversation on unwanted eating behaviors and learn how to shift the nervous system, rewire the brain to new patterns, and end the food and body obsession so you can finally feel relaxed and no longer confused around food. Today you're listening to Fat Loss 101, a two-part series masterclass where I'm sharing the basic science of fat loss, the hormones responsible for fat storage mode and fat loss mode, the 4 things that have to happen to switch the body into fat loss mode, and how you can turn your body into a fat burning machine no matter how long you've been in fat storage mode. And hint, it's not through dieting. So if you're ready to ditch the dieting roller coaster and curious about how to get your body to work with you instead of against you, you'll definitely want to listen in today. Now, before we begin, I want to quickly invite you to grab your copy of my Food Freedom ebook that I have for you at makepeacewithfood.com. And if you find that this conversation resonates with you today, then maybe consider sharing it with someone who you know may need to hear it too. And finally, if you feel called, then I also want to invite you to join our free Make Peace with Food Facebook group at myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com, where you can connect with me and my team directly. All the links are in the show notes. All right, athletes, now let's get into it. We're going to be talking about the basics of fat loss. And this is a 2-part series. And this is one of my favorite conversations to talk about because generally when it comes to fat loss, the focus is usually on the diet, on the restrictions, on what they call the science of food or macros. But what we're actually going to do instead is we're going to shift to the actual science of the body, what's happening in the body, and how the body actually responds to more than what we are just consuming through food. We're going to be talking about Fat Loss 101. And more specifically, we're not actually going to be talking about what we have to eat in order for fat loss to happen and how we have to calculate our calories and our macros and all these things, because this is not really the science of food that we're concerned about. We're actually going to be talking about the science in the body, more specifically, the biochemistry of the body and what needs to happen in order for us to shift into a fat burning machine. Now, bear with me a moment, and I'm going to ask you, like I did a few calls ago, a few trainings ago, I'm going to ask you to never say, I know that. So as I share with you some information today, I just want you to take those 3 words out of your mind, because remember, when we think, I know that, it's going to block our ability to learn something new. And so first and foremost, I'm going to be sharing with you 4 principles that you can apply immediately to help you switch into a fat burning machine. However, I also want to share with you that it is so hard to condense all of the things that need to happen into 2 small trainings. And you know, our trainings are about 20 minutes long. However, we expand in full detail in our course, Make Peace with Food. And that's actually what we talk about in the end of the program. The way that our program is structured is, first, we create awareness around understanding why we engage in unwanted eating behaviors. Then we share with you the tools to interrupt the patterns of unwanted eating behaviors. And then finally, we start to shift into the nutrition part, the fitness part. And we do this through a way of habit stacking, where you actually apply the rule of addition first before subtraction. And again, we get more into what that looks like later in the program, but these are some of the conversations that we talk about. And instead of focusing on a meal plan or a diet, what we actually do is focus on installing one habit, mastering it, installing the next habit, and mastering that before moving on to yet another habit. And so in today's masterclass, I'm going to share with you 2 of the 4 things that you need to do in order to help shift your body into a fat burning machine. Now, first and foremost, I want to start off by saying our body is generally in either of 2 modes. We are either in fat storage mode or we are in fat loss mode. So the body is either storing or releasing. And this all depends on several factors. So this depends on your nervous system state, which is what we talk about and address in Make Peace with Food. We help you shift into that nervous system state that facilitates fat release from the body. And then we also want to address number 2, hormones, because hormones have a major impact on whether or not we are in fat storage mode or fat loss mode. Again, that's very, very much tied into the nervous system state. And then finally, we talk about lifestyle habits. And these lifestyle habits are not just what we're doing, but it's also how we are thinking. And so the first thing that you have to do if you really want to turn your body into a fat burning machine is you have to stop restricting. You have to stop dieting. I know it sounds so backwards because everything we've ever learned was you have to diet to release weight to be healthy. But what we're actually saying is it's the inverse. If you really want to release body fat, you have to stop dieting. You have to stop being in a calorie deficit. And the metabolism starts to slow down after 72 hours of being in a calorie deficit. Meaning that if I say, for example, and by the way, we don't count calories in our program and we don't count calories at all inside this group, but I like to bring some numbers into things sometimes because it makes it more tangible. And so let's say for me, for example, if I need, let's say, 1,500 calories in order for my body to have enough energy to run its natural processes, and I decide that I need to release weight for whatever reason, and I decide to get into a calorie deficit, which means I'm going to reduce my caloric intake, let's say, by 500 calories a day. And so that would bring me, let's say, to about 1,000 calories a day. And by the way, you should never, ever go lower than even 1,200 calories. And that is like the most basic generic statement ever because we're all different heights and sizes and have very, very different energy requirements. But if I were to restrict and put myself in a calorie deficit, giving my body less calories than it needs to function to be able to really keep homeostasis, to be able to do all the functions that it needs to do, after 72 hours, I will see my metabolism slow down. That's how fast it happens. That's how fast it happens. After 72 hours of being in a calorie deficit, no matter what your app is telling you and calculating for you in 2 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks from now, you will slow down your metabolism. And now here's the other thing that happens. Anytime that we are in a calorie deficit for a prolonged amount of time, not only do we start to increase our thoughts about food, and more specifically, thinking about the foods that we're not allowed to have, but we also trigger protection mode. Remember that protection mode is that mode of the nervous system that favors survival. So our metabolism is going to slow down. We're going to notice also that all these thoughts about food all day long is going to likely lead us to a binge or to overeat or to maybe eat foods that we don't normally consume if we weren't dieting, simply because we created a restriction in our mind. And then here's also another thing that happens when we put ourselves in a calorie deficit. Now, our goal is to release weight, right? And generally we use the scale so that we can find out whether or not we're going in the right direction and see our progress and see that the weight is coming down. But the body loves its body fat stores because that's gold. And in fact, the body favors body fat over muscle tissue because body fat is required for many functions, not only for lubrication of joints and for a healthy nervous system and for creating hormones and enzymes and brain function and all of these amazing things. So the reason that we may see a loss of weight does not necessarily have to be reflective of a loss of body fat. And so when we release weight on the scale, what we're actually seeing is that we've lost muscle tissue and fat tissue. Again, when we're in a calorie deficit, the body's going to favor holding on to stored fat. It's actually going to give up that muscle tissue a lot easier. And now here's the issue. Our muscle tissue is the calorie burning factory. That's where all the energy of the body, the calories, are consumed in the form of glucose. And so I won't get into the biochemical processes of what happens, but I just want to share with you that if you intentionally want to release body fat, then that has to be your goal. Otherwise, if we say we're going to release weight, well, that could be body fat, and that could also be muscle tissue. And again, our muscle tissue is so precious to us personally if we're wanting to move into a lean body or reduce percent body fat, because that's where all the magic happens. And so by restricting and by putting yourself in a calorie deficit after 72 hours, you're going to trigger protection mode. You're going to slow down your metabolism. And then your body's going to start to consume its own muscle tissue to make glucose or energy for survival before it starts to tap into its fat stores. Because again, for the body physiologically and biochemically, that is a more precious tissue. And I'm talking specifically about the fat tissue. And so that's why we end up seeing the yo-yo dieting effect. So we go on a diet, we reduce our calories, we lose a whole bunch of weight, we're super happy, we got on the scale, we lost a whole bunch of weight, and then time rolls by, and then maybe we start to go back to some old habits, and then we notice that not only did we put on that weight, but we put on even more than when we first started dieting the first time, because we've also lost some of our muscle tissue. So by nature, when we lose our muscle tissue, we bring our metabolism to a lower burning point at rest, meaning whatever calories I burn at rest right now is very much dependent on how much muscle tissue I have in my body. And so if I lose that muscle tissue, that means I burn less calories at rest. And so if you're listening to this and this is resonating with you, let's try something different. And so maybe instead of restricting calories, maybe we can actually focus on how can we increase lean body mass? How can we increase more muscle tissue? Because the more muscle I have in my body, the more calories I can burn at rest, the more energy requirements my body needs. And well, my body's going to have to find that energy somewhere. And generally it'll go into the fat stores to use that. And so I know for many of us, this is kind of a scary thing, especially women, and then putting on muscle and then lifting weights. And sometimes we feel like, oh my goodness, I don't want to get too big and jacked and bulky and all that. But I'm going to tell you that it takes a very, 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 very long time for that to happen. It will not happen overnight. That's the first thing. Second of all, we don't have the hormones, the testosterone and the amount of growth hormone that is required to super bulk up. And so that would be something that I want you to just completely remove from your belief system if this right now is blocking you from the idea of lifting weights or increasing lean body mass, okay? I've been doing it for almost 25 years, lifting weights very, very, very consistently for 25 years. And man, is it hard. Man, is it hard. So don't worry about that. If that's a concern of yours, release that concern and just really focus on listening to your body and strengthening your body. Plus, it's so great to have that muscle tissue because over time, it helps keep us stable and strong and avoid other injuries like falling. And by the way, falling is one of the major ways that we actually end up injuring ourselves as we age. And it's a lot oftentimes due to the fact that we are sedentary and we've actually lost a lot of that muscle tissue. The second thing I want to share with you today, okay, the second thing we have to address if we want to shift into a fat burning machine is to manage the hormone cortisol. Now, cortisol alongside with adrenaline are the two hormones that are released when we are in protection mode. And these hormones, again, are responsible not only to give us alertness and maybe keep us in more of a tunnel vision view so that we can really see what's in front of us and take action. It really helps us predict the future. It really helps also facilitate energy stored in the body so that we can act immediately. But the other thing it also does is it makes it so that, again, we conserve energy. Remember that protection mode is that survival mode. And so the body will do everything it possibly can to slow down the metabolism, to also reduce that effect or the ability to tap into those fat stores. We want to conserve energy as much as possible. And then finally, it's going to increase cravings for us to want or desire foods that are very high in energy, that can offer us an immediate energy source. And so when our cortisol is high, meaning we have a lot of stress in our life and we're not managing our stress, we're going to notice that we're going to tend to have more cravings for sugar. We're going to tend to want to crave the foods that are going to give us an immediate source of energy. And now that's fast food, that's processed food, that's refined foods. And if you have a lot of cravings for these foods specifically, oftentimes it's because our cortisol levels are high. And so if we really want to shift into a fat burning mode so that the body's really in that fat loss mode versus that fat storage mode, just to recap quickly what we did and what we talked about today is number one, stop restricting and instead focus on building lean body mass. And then number two, be mindful and aware of your levels of stress. And that is the cortisol hormone that is responsible for weight gain, especially around the belly area, and responsible for all of the cravings that we have for foods that are going to give us an immediate source of energy. And so we want to manage our stress if we're going to manage cortisol. And a big part of managing our stress is also managing how much coffee we consume, what our caffeine consumption is, for example. We want to manage also our sleep quality, because if we get restful sleep and we get a number of hours of restful sleep, we're also going to be able to help regulate cortisol levels. And now the final thing that I want to say to you is that our diet is not just what we're consuming. And so I want you to dissociate that word diet from food. They don't go together anymore as of this moment. Instead, I want you to think about your diet as everything that you consume in your being, whether that's through the mouth, so that's food through the mouth, or alcohol, or maybe sugary drinks or juice. This could also be the amount of caffeine that you consume. This could be the medication that you take. And then your diet is also what you hear. It is the conversations that you sit down in, the conversations that may be stressful for you, or maybe you have a toxic relationship or a toxic friendship with somebody. And every time you sit in that conversation, you notice it's very triggering and it's increasing your cortisol every time. And then also whatever you're watching. So I know a lot of us are watching the news and we're very much paying attention to what's on the news. But I'm going to ask you, how much % of your time is your diet focusing on things that don't serve you versus the things that serve you? And so again, it's not just about what we're consuming through the mouth, but what are we watching? Is the majority of what we're watching very stressful things and scary things and makes us feel like the world is going to explode and there's just no hope for humanity and there's all these terrible things happening? Or are you creating a balance between all the amazing things that are also happening in the world? Because they are also happening, except the news stations won't show you that because they want you to keep watching. And it gets boring to watch something that is fun or positive or exciting. We always come back to want to watch things that are like, oh my God, this is so scary. This is so terrible. What's going to happen next? And so we get hooked on this information. And then also evaluate your friendships, evaluate your relationships, evaluate your environment, where you're living, where you're staying, who you surround yourself with, and what you surround yourself with. All of that makes up part of your diet. And so today we touched on 2 of the 4 things that we need to address if we really want to switch the body from fat storage mode to fat loss mode. And in our next training next week, same place, same time, we're going to talk about the last 2. And now you don't want to miss this because these are going to be really, really important. And again, our goal is to share with you very simple ways for you not only to transform your health and fitness, but to make peace with food. And we have this conception that in order for us to really get the results that we want, is that we have to work super hard, we have to be super restrictive, and oftentimes that's really just not sustainable for us. But instead, what we're going to be teaching you through our time together and through our conversations together is that number 1, You don't actually need to do a lot of resistance training for you to see results and to build muscle, to put your body in that fat burning zone. But instead, something as little as 5 to 12 minutes every single day is sufficient. Check out the workouts I have for you on YouTube for ideas, or even the HitDex app that we share with you. These are ways that you really can just get started in your journey, and more importantly, listen to your body so that you can progress over time. And then the second thing that we want to do is simplify the science, because there's too much information out there. And what we don't realize is that no matter how much information we have, none of that really matters if our body's nervous system is in protection mode. If we are in protection mode, then our body will always favor fat storage. And it'll always feel like no matter how much effort we're putting in, we're just not getting results. And so I want to say to you that this is not your fault. And it's just about understanding how to shift your nervous system. And so if you're in a place right now where you are resonating with this conversation, where you feel like it's time to maybe try something different, you've been trying so many diets and restrictions for so many years, and it's not bringing you to where you want to be, then let's entertain the idea and get curious about trying something else. And maybe that thing is as simple as shifting your nervous system. And so when you join our free 30-minute strategy call, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the plan of how to get you from where you are now to where it is that you want to go. And we're also going to identify whether or not for you specifically, there is a nervous system issue at play. If we determine that there is, we're going to share with you different ways that you can join Make Peace with Food. Again, if that feels like that is in your own alignment. And there's different ways to join depending on how much support that you need. So there's different investment points as well to enter the program in a way that feels comfortable for you. And if we also find that our program can't support you, regardless, we're going to provide value. That is our goal for you. And we're going to help you get started on your journey to make peace with food and to move towards the goals that you desire. So regardless, it is a win-win situation. And if you've been in here for a while, if you've been in this place for a while, what would it be like to have a life that is completely 100% on your terms, where you're not obsessing about food, where your whole world and your whole day does not revolve around what you're going to eat, when you're going to eat, or feeling guilty about what you ate, or starting the day off with the first thoughts of food and then ending the day with guilt and shame and a little bit of frustration around what you ate or what you didn't do? How about we release that and get into a place of calmness? Shift our nervous system from protection mode to safety mode so that your body always is working with you instead of against you. And so with that, I wish you a very beautiful rest of your day. I will see you here next week to talk about part 2, Fat Loss 101, the next 2 things that we have to do to shift our body into a fat burning machine. You got this, athletes. I will see you next week. Thank you for listening to this week's Make Peace with Food Minisode on the Fall in Love with Fitness podcast. If this has resonated with you today, I want to invite you to subscribe to the show so you never miss a beat. And if you know someone who could benefit from this conversation, then please share this episode with them. Let's work together to help as many people as possible make peace with food and fall in love with fitness. And by the way, I need to mention that if you rate and review this podcast on iTunes and send over the screenshot to Sherry at sherryshaban.com, you'll receive a $500 voucher to join me at one of my upcoming retreats or to use it in our Make Peace with Food coaching program. And don't forget to visit myfoodfreedomlifestyle.com to join the free Facebook group for more resources. And remember, athlete, you are an inspiration. I cannot wait to hear your story.